Okay, let's pick up where we left off yesterday. Let's get back to doing some factoring and just generally solving quadratic equations. So when I look at this one, I notice that my 2 is outside of the parentheses. So that's the first thing I have to get rid of. Now that's 2 times x plus 4 squared, so I have to divide by 2 to get it started. When I divide by 2, I get x plus 4 squared equals 3. Now in order to move on from here, I need to actually get rid of my squared. So I'm going to take the square root of both sides. Now taking the square root gets rid of my squared. Those cancel out. I'm left with x plus 4 equals, and it has to be a plus and minus square root of 3. Now I have to get the 4 to the other side. In order to get it to the other side, I subtract. So it's x equals negative 4 plus or minus square root of 3. Now there's 2 separate answers here. I have negative 4 plus the square root of 3 and negative 4 minus the square root of 3. And those are my 2 answers. I don't want you to break the square root of 3 down into decimals or anything like that. Just leave it the way it is. Okay, that takes us to our next method of solving a quadratic. We can solve a quadratic by completing the square. To complete the square of the expression x squared plus bx, add the square of 1/2 the coefficient of x, which would be b over 2 squared. So it's the coefficient of x, or the number that's in front of the x. We take half of that, divide it by 2, and then square it. The addition will produce a perfect square trinomial. So we leave all this the way it was, but we're adding b over 2 squared to both sides. In order to do this, the easiest way to do it is to start by writing the equation in the form x squared plus bx equals c. So if I have some number on this side, I need to, where it's just a number, I have to get it over to the other side. Just get that constant over. Then add b over 2 squared to both sides, so the left side becomes a perfect square. The right side would become a constant, and take the square root of both sides. These are just the instructions. I don't expect you to figure out how to do it yet without actually seeing a problem. Okay, so now we start with 2x squared minus 6x plus 1. So starting with that, we're going to complete the square, which means we need to get this. Oh, that sound means it's time for the word of the day. The word of the day is completing. If you send me an email within the next 24 hours with just the word completing in it, I mean, you can put more than that, I'll give you 5 bonus points. 5 bonus points on either a homework assignment, a quiz, or a test. All right, back to the actual notes. First thing I have to do is I have to get this 1 over to the other side. I want to get rid of that constant. So I have 2x squared minus 6x equals negative 1. But if I look at this now, if I go back to my original, you'll notice something. My original just had x squared. This has a 2x squared. So if I'm looking at what it said to complete the square of x squared, it doesn't say anything about a coefficient being in front of the x squared. That's going to take us to our next actual step. In order to do this, if I have a coefficient in front of the x squared, I have to divide both sides by a, which is the leading coefficient. I can only have a leading coefficient of 1 in order to make this work. So for that last problem, I'm going to have to go back and divide everything by 2 on both sides. Now let's continue to finish the procedure. I will then add the square of half of BA, that is B over 2A squared, to both sides. Write the left side of the equation as a perfect square. Take the square root of both sides, which will give me a plus and a minus. And then I would subtract B over 2A from both sides. That seems like a lot, but it's not that bad. Let's go ahead and finish this problem out. So we just established that the next thing I have to do is I have to divide both sides by my leading coefficient. Means I have to divide by 2 here and divide by 2 here. That's going to give me x squared. Negative 6 divided by 2 is negative 3. And this is still negative 1/2. Now I take this number over 2 because that's what it tells me to do. And I square it. That's going to give me positive 9 over 4. Because I have to square both the top and the bottom. So it's going to be plus 9 over 4. Equals, whatever I add to this side, I have to add to this side as well. So it's negative 1/2 plus 9 over 4. Now there's a reason that I always do this portion in a separate step. The reason for that is whenever I turn this into a perfect square, this left side, it's always going to be x, and then whatever this is was inside of here. I took the b over 2. That was minus 3/2. That minus 3/2 comes down to here, and then it's squared. Now I'm going to simplify the right-hand side. It's negative 1/2 plus 9/4. I have to get a common denominator, which means I have to multiply the bottom by 2. Whatever I do to the bottom, I do to the top. So this would be negative 2 over 4 plus 9 over 4. And that's because negative 2/4 is the same as negative 1/2. Combine those, negative 2 plus 9 gives me 7 over 4. Now I take the square root of both sides. That's going to cancel my square out. I'm left with x minus 3/2 equals plus and minus the square root of 7 over 2. Why is it the square root of 7 over 2? Because I took the square root of 4 already. Now I add the 3 over 2 to the other side. That's an ugly 2. It gives me x equals 3 over 2 plus and minus the square root of 7 over 2. Final answer, you don't have to go any further. We can simplify that a little bit and do 3 plus root 7 all over 2. Plus and minus, that is. But that's as far as we need to go. There's no perfect root of 7, so we stop. These are just our directions. I think it's easier to follow the directions whenever you're actually going through a problem. If you're, especially in this capacity now that you're taking your quizzes and things at home, while you have your notebooks accessible to you, it just makes it easier for you. You can actually look at the process as you're actually doing your homework problems or your quiz problems. Let's try this one. So we already have it lined up with the 12 on the right side. There's no leading coefficient, so we don't have to divide by anything. So now we just have to do the b over 2 and square it. So negative 2 over 2 squared. Negative 2 divided by 2, that gives me negative 1. Negative 1 squared is 1. So it's x squared minus 2x plus 1. Whatever I added to that left side, I have to add to the right side. So it's plus 1. Now again, whatever I found inside of here, whenever I'm turning this into a perfect square, oops, sorry, don't need that squared yet. Come on, man. Negative 2 over 2 is 1, so this turns into x minus 1 squared equals 13. Take the square root of both sides. It gives me x minus 1 equals plus and minus root 13. Add the 1 over, x equals 1 plus and minus square root of 13. That's my final answer. So completing the square isn't too bad. You just have to get used to doing it. Take some getting used to. Take some practice. Our next is going to be using the quadratic formula. I don't want to go there yet. Let's go ahead and work on completing the square and solidify this technique.